Hello humans, I am the Black Cat, and today we look at the Re-Animator. The Re-Animator was released in 1985, directed by Stuart Gordon, and originally written by H.P. Lovecraft. Based on H.P. Lovecraft's story of the same name, the Re-Animator follows the story of Dan, a medical student working in a hospital. He moves into his own house but can't afford the rent by himself, so he looks for a roommate. Meanwhile, he's dating the dean's daughter. A new student is transferring from Switzerland after an incident is introduced. The new student is Herbert West. He's a genius, but also kinda insane. He basically fills the mad scientist role. We're also introduced to Dr. Hill. Dr. Hill is Dan and Herbert's lecturer, and West accuses him of plagiarizing his old mentor's work. They immediately don't like each other.
How can you teach such drivel? These people are here to learn and you're closing their minds before they even have a chance.
Herbert moves in with Dan. After a short time, Dan discovers that Herbert is up to something strange. Meanwhile, Dr. Hill hypnotizes Megan's father, the dean, planting the idea in his head that Dan is not good for his daughter. Dr. Hill has a kind of obsession with Megan and doesn't like the idea that she's dating Dan. Do I want to talk about my brethren, the poor black cat that was Dan's pet Rufus? I guess I have to. Dan and his girlfriend Megan discover that West has Rufus's dead body in his bar fridge in his room. When questioned, he tells Dan that he found Rufus dead and put him in the fridge until he had a chance to tell Dan. Megan isn't buying it and accuses West of killing him. Later that night, Dan is woken by a strange sound coming from the basement. He goes in to find West battling with a black cat. The cat attacks them until Dan throws it against a wall, effectively killing it. West explains to Dan that he has created a reagent that is capable of bringing dead tissue back to life. Dan, of course, doesn't believe him, so West injects the poor, now twice dead Rufus. Dan watches as Rufus comes back to life. Faced with the idea of being able to effectively cheat death, Dan becomes interested in the reagent and West's work. Dan agrees to help West. In the original Lovecraft story, the story is told from the point of view of an unnamed assistant. In the movie, Dan fills this role. He basically becomes West's assistant and does whatever he tells him, even going against Megan's wishes to do so. Having been influenced by Hill, the dean expels Dan and West. West explains to Dan that he's reached all he can do with animal testing and wants to move on to testing on humans. Dan at first disagrees, but West convinces him to go ahead. Dan is a real pushover basically, but not when it comes to his girlfriend. So Dan and West go to the morgue in the hospital to find a suitable body to experiment with. They find one and use the reagent on him. Meanwhile, the dean, now with Megan in tow, goes to the hospital to find them. Because they've been expelled, they no longer have a right to be there. When they do reanimate the body, it goes crazy and attacks them. While it's attacking, the dean comes down to find them and is killed by the reanimated corpse. West immediately grabs the dean's body and explains to Dan that it didn't work because the body had been dead for too long. He tells him that it should work better on the dean because he's more fresh. He convinces Dan that they could bring him back to life, so of course Dan the dope agrees. They bring him back to life and he immediately starts to attack Dan and West. At this point, however, Megan comes in, and at the sound of her voice, the dean backs off. West convinces the police that the dean just went crazy and attacked them. The dean is then put into a padded cell in Hill's office. Why Hill has a padded cell in his office, I don't know. Hill tells Megan that he can help him if she gives him permission to perform exploratory surgery. She reluctantly agrees, and Hill lobotomizes him. As he's working on him, he discovers that the dean is actually dead, and realizes that West brought him back to life. So he goes to West to take his work and claim it as his own. He hypnotizes West into complying, but West is able to break out of the hypnosis and kills Hill by cutting his head off with a shovel. He then decides to try the reagent on the head and body, both of which come back to life. They knock West out and steal the reagent. Hill then goes back to the hospital and starts to recruit some help. He commands the dean to kidnap his daughter and bring him to her, so he does. In the morgue, some stuff happens is rather gross. No, it's very gross. Dan and West arrive, Dan wants to save Megan, and West wants to save his work.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
But Dr. Hill has a backup plan. As they try to get out, he reanimated all the dead bodies in the morgue and has control over them. So they attack Dan and West. As they try to get out, Megan calls for her father and he recognizes her voice. He helps them get away and kills Dr. Hill once and for all. In an attempt to overload Hill's body, West injects it with more reagent. This results in the body's intestines coming out and wrapping around West like a snake. He throws the bag with all his work in it to Dan as Dan and Megan escape. Being taken from a Lovecraft story that was based in the early 1900s, it definitely has that Frankenstein feel to it. There are a lot of elements in this movie that are reminiscent of classic horror movies, including the opening titles with the medical imagery. The music is also very classic horror. While watching, I couldn't help think that the music was similar to the music in Psycho, but apparently that was intentional. They took inspiration from the original Psycho music. Director Stuart Gordon originally wanted to turn the story into a TV series set in the early 1900s, but he realized that creating a period show would be very expensive, so he ended up having it set in modern times. Special effects technician Bob Greenberg also apparently convinced Stewart that the best medium for horror is in feature-length films rather than a TV show. Personally, I would agree. Most horror shows from the 80s tend to fade out in popularity, whereas horror movies from the 80s have the ability to become cult classics and are still watched and talked about today. I mean, I'm talking about it right now, and you're watching a video of me talking about it right now. Ah yes, we have come full circle. I have of course seen this movie many times before, however the version I'm used to was different from the one I watched for this review. This version I got as part of a set of the Re-Animator trilogy, but watching it I realized there are some things that I'd never seen before. For one, there's a whole subplot of West injecting himself with the reagent as a way of him not having to sleep. He says it keeps his mind awake. I'm not sure I like that inclusion. On one hand, yes, a crazy scientist type like West would probably do something like that to stay awake so he could continue to work, but on the other hand, it made him seem like he was dependent on it, almost like a drug addict, begging Dean to help him inject. It somehow lessened his smart-ass, in-control demeanor. It made him seem weak in a way. Another aspect that was new, to me at least, was the inclusion of Dr. Hill hypnotizing people. In a weird way, it made more sense that he was able to get away with so much because he literally mind-controlled people. But in another way, it sometimes came off as too convenient, like a quick solution to a situation. There's also apparently different versions where the nudity was toned down a lot. Is it necessary to have an abundance of nudity in horror? I guess it really depends on the movie and the story involved. In this case, the nudity does fit with what's happening in the scene, however uncomfortable it may be. The character of Dan, I think, fits well with the assistant role. He's just gullible enough that he's easily convinced. Being a student doctor himself, he has grand ideas of wanting to help people, but of course, even doctors can't always help. This is established early on when we see Dan try to resuscitate a patient only for her to die. So the idea that he can cheat death is appealing to him. He believes in West's work. He believes it can make a difference. I think Jeffrey Combs was the exact right person to play Herbert West. He's both confident and crazy at the same time. He has moments of complete composure and then moments of being totally erratic. Unlike Dan, I don't think West's motives are altruistic. I think he's just interested in how far he can go with playing with life and death. Surprisingly, I didn't find the character of Megan that annoying. She was reasonable in her actions, she saw through West's lies straight away, and she stood up for what she believed was right. Megan was probably the most level-headed character in the whole movie. Then, of course, we have to talk about Dr. Hill. Oh, Dr. Hill. He's a bit of a strange one. He uses hypnosis to get his way. He apparently plagiarizes other doctors' work. He wants to be famous, but he also wants to bang the dean's daughter, who, by the way, is way too young for him. As I said, the whole hypnosis thing did seem a little too convenient at some points. but I think Dr. Hill was a good antagonist, and he was played well by David Gale. For the most part, the makeup effects were very good. The bodies with their various injuries did look convincing. There was a lot of blood. The use of clever editing and camera work also made Dr. Hill's head look convincing. Like the body would grab the head, but then there's a cut to a behind shot of the body lifting the head, so it flows nicely. The only time that the effects didn't work so well was when the body was apparently holding Hill's head while he was talking to West. It was very obvious that he was under the body's clothes. You can literally see the outline of his shoulders. So having a long shot in that scene didn't work so well. But overall, the makeup and editing effects were pretty solid. Like I said, I've seen this movie many times before, and I'll no doubt watch it many times again. It's always good for a laugh. It's gory and gross. Some scenes, one scene in particular, is rather uncomfortable to watch, but Herbert West is a good character. He has become a bit of a horror icon, and I think well deserved. So, I would recommend this movie to any horror fan who for some crazy reason hasn't seen it yet. You should. But anyway, let me know what you think of this movie, if you've seen it. If you like this review, you can go ahead and give it a like. If you'd like to see more, you can also subscribe. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!